I just want to thank everyone who's joining us this morning. We are so glad to have you with us. Today's a really special day for us because particularly I think in the context of coffee, we don't always get to hear the voices of women of Haitian descent speaking about what's happening at origin. In this case, hey Shai, you're back. So I'm just giving a quick hello introduction to our audience right now, and then I'll go through each of your bios. To set the stage, today is really special because for Women's History Future Month, we're getting to hear from three incredible pioneers in the space of innovation and justice, gender equality. So it's really, really important to me that the voices of women are amplified, not just when it's convenient, not just when it's popular, but at all times, because we know that when women are thriving, communities thrive, countries thrive, our world community, our global community will thrive. And so with that, here we are with our very first Davila Kafe webinar focusing on access to justice and innovation at origin in Haiti. I have with me here three wonderful women, and so I'm going to start by actually listing out their bios. We have with us Naomi Millien. Naomi is a gender specialist and general manager of the Centre Cazé in Haiti. She's been a steadfast advocate for women's rights and has worked in the field of gender studies and female empowerment for over 10 years. Naomi is also a founding member of the Centre d'Appui et de Formation des Jeunes, a faith-based organization in her church that campaigns for the development of youth and their transition into adulthood in Port-au-Prince. Next with us, we have Shaina Silva. Shaina is an award-winning entrepreneur, ecosystem architect, and digital transformation strategist. A fierce advocate for women leading the new economy, Shaina founded the #SheBuilt Global Initiative, an international platform that exists to accelerate social, economic, and environmental progress in Haiti by equipping women entrepreneurs, innovators, and change makers with the tools to scale their impact. Today, the platform has a network that reaches over 20 cities across 4 continents and leverages technology to connect and invest in women builders who are shaping the future of Haiti, and I'd also add the world. Then we have with us today the lovely, intelligent, fabulous Cassandre Theano. So Cassandre is an international human rights attorney, advocate, and diplomat with over a decade of experience working at the intersection of human rights, racial justice, development, and philanthropy. She is the Assistant Director for Human Rights and Public International Law at Columbia Law School's Office of Social Justice Initiatives, and she is a Foreign Service attorney serving in the Africa Bureau of USAID. Well, hey there, fellow diplomat. She also teaches the United Nations externship at the law school and is an adjunct professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. My goodness, sitting with the three of you this morning, it just gives me life. And I believe that everyone who is listening here today and in the future, as this webinar is going to be recorded, we're all, I know, going to walk out from this better informed, better equipped to actually look at the challenges as perhaps spaces of opportunity, to look at the challenges that we're going to be speaking about as opportunities to truly change the narrative and to engage in a manner that will impact the future for good. With that being said, we're gonna go ahead and launch. And for those who I should, David would tell me, oh, cheers. I will cheers with some café to start off. Cheers, ladies. But to start off, David would tell me, Gaina, you have to introduce yourself. So I'm going to awkwardly introduce myself. Hi, for those who don't know me, I am Gaina Davila. I am the co-founder of Davila Kafe Coffee Company. My husband, David Davila, and I, we started this company because we wanted to, see greater representation in the specialty coffee world. At the time when we started the company, we didn't know that there were other folks who were working in the specialty coffee world who were people of color, because for the most part, all we ever saw were people who weren't of color in that space. We didn't see our narratives, we didn't see our stories, and we certainly didn't see much at all about Haitian coffee or Nicaraguan coffee. And so with that, we were like, oh, this isn't cool, we should change this. So two very naive young married couple, going out and starting this company. And so during the day, I am a full-time diplomat and I love my career in the space of diplomacy. But I would say that coffee is also one of my passions. So yes, that's a little bit about me. And now let's get into this conversation. All right, ladies, so I'm actually going to start with the first question, which will be pitched to all three of you. And that question is, could you each tell us one word that describes the role that women have played in Haitian society since its independence in 1804? And if I may ask, we'll start in alphabetical order. Naomi, if you could please start with us.
Good morning, ladies. Do you hear me? Yes, okay. Good morning, ladies. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gaina, for choosing me to talk with such amazing women. And congrats for your project, Davila Kafe. Thank you. My word is defender. If I refer to historical accounts, many women have played important roles in Haiti. So it will be really hard to reduce all this action to one word, if I can say that, from Queen Anna Kauna to Catherine from Sanité de l'Air, Claire Hereuse, to more modern examples like Daniel Magloire or Michel Pierre-Louis, to name but a few. Women still have a fundamental roles in respecting life and human rights. Unfortunately, as many countries, we live in a patriarchal society and little credit is given to the achievement of women, especially in Haiti. But we can say has a lot of single parents, families in Haiti are led by women. And we can say that women not only defend their rights, but the right for the future.
Thank you so much, Naomi, for that. Yes, snaps all around. And now, if I may, Shaina, if you could please share with us. I'm happy to repeat the question if you'd like. Just let me know.
All good, all good. Thank you, Gaina, and multiple snaps for Naomi. That was powerful. I love that word, defender. I also want to echo Naomi in saying thank you, Gaina and David, for creating this platform that is incredibly important. We need to be able to share these types of thoughts and ideas and have these types of discussions and raise awareness. So thank you for everything that you've been doing. And I'm having a sip of Davila Kafe this morning. Thank you. My word is spine. Spine in the body is what allows the rest of the body to function. It is what allows the rest of your membranes to actually receive energy and power. And so for me, without women as the spine, or women rather represent the spine in our society, because without women, the rest of our neural networks does not receive this power, this energy in order to thrive. If you cut off women, even reproduction cannot be sustained. So my word is spine.
Mesdames, I'm gonna just fall over. And I will say that we might interject for our English speaking only audience. There might be some Creole, a little bit of, words thrown into this conversation, as it is a conversation featuring Haitian women. So let's keep it going. Kassan, if you could please share with us your word. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for this platform, Gaina and David, and very honored to be on this panel with Naomi and China. So my word is unrelenting. So Haitian women, they've been there, right? They've fought alongside the men whose names we know very well and can blur it out in a split second, but they have been dehistoricized in many ways. So literally removed from history. So we have to be intentional and remember them. And I'm so happy that Naomi took the time to name a few of these women. So thank you for that. And we need to keep doing that exercise of naming them, right? So that we can restore their rightful place in history. And women continue to do the work of building this nation, of birthing its children, literally and figuratively. And they are the ones who are always on the front lines demanding justice. And I will give a few specific examples of that later on in the talk, but that's my word, unrelenting.
Ladies, the world, if only the world knew the treasures that Haiti has. Thank you so very much for those words. I think those words are going to carry me into this week, in fact. So thank you for that. So moving into our next question here, I'd like to ask, what is the significance of that word? So the word that each of you just proposed to our audience, what is that? What is the significance of that word to you in the context? So I'm going to actually speak to each of you separately with this. So first and foremost, Naomi, what is the significance of that word that you gave to us, which was defender, in the context of gender equality? So when you're thinking about gender equality, what does it mean to you that a woman is a defender? Thank you.
I can say when it comes to equal rights, there is no doubt that women are still defenders of human rights and gender equality. Even when we see major structural problems in the justice in Haiti, feminist organizations and associations do a colossal job offering assistance and support to victims. In November, South Kaizen conducted a webinar on the role of rural community organization in preventing and combating GVG, gender-based violence. It allows us to see how grassroots organization, when women leadership is valued, start to create, like I can say, an ecosystem, structural system with different actors who came together to address different issues to prevent and intervene in gender-based violence. There is a lot to do that can support those initiatives. However, with the pandemic, we have learned two important things. First, that women can lose what we have earned in rights. And third, and second, that technologies are a powerful tools that can be accessed to change the system. Women need to take advantage of technologies to continue and to strengthen their fight in justice, and also to strengthen their organization and to have, I can say, a more collective action around gender diversity. And I will talk more about that and about what South Kaizen do to I can say, to fuel that energy in Haiti.
Merci, Naomi. Thank you very much for that response. And so we're going to go in alphabetical order here. So Shaina, I'm going to repeat the question to you, but in the context of your space of influence. What is the significance of the word that you provided, which was spine? I love that. in the context of innovation on the ground?
So spine, at least in the human body, I would compare it in the tech space to the motherboard. How convenient that it's called the motherboard. It's the circuitry that is inside of your computer that connects all of the components of your computer together. So everything in your computer is connected thanks to your motherboard. The motherboard is also the platform that powers the computer and gives it its power supply. So similar to our human spine, the motherboard plays that role. So in the world of technology, the motherboard is an extremely important aspect of making the computer function well and be powered. Without power, you don't have a functioning computer. It's just a dead device. So I would say in the world of innovation, especially on the ground in a context like Haiti, where you have a system that has been sort of permeating a cycle that has been destructive, almost self-destructive. You have a motherboard that has been weakened because it's not given the proper linkages to power the rest of the ecosystem. So I'll break that down a little bit. We have a very strong society because of our history and how proud we are of who we are. But that has been weakened over the years with various influences, both internal and external. But women have always played that role of grounding our society. And as Cassandre and Naomi have said, really being defenders and pushing for justice, right? But these linkages have been very much weakened because we have, unfortunately, a very patriarchal society. So the extent to which that power supply can reach the nodes to really activate something that will transform our society is not very strong. And that's because women don't have very often a voice. Most of the media, you will hear very likely about the men who are succeeding or who are failing. So we don't have enough of a critical mass with our voices that is activating these nodes that can create that can channel the power supply that will generate that transformation that we need. So it's very much a weakened motherboard. And what I would probably compare that to in how things have been going on today is if you think about what's happening in Haiti in terms of politics and whose faces you're often seeing and whose faces you're never seeing. You will very much look at Twitter, the news, and who's telling the news and see only one side of the gender wheel, men. You don't see a lot of women actually being presented as politicians or as public defenders of what's happening in Haiti. We have a small number of them, Emmanuelle Douillon being one of them. She was recently in a House conversation voicing her opinion, very powerful woman, but there's not many of them, right? So that motherboard is weakened because of these linkages, and these linkages don't exist because we don't have enough of a platform to speak our truth. So the ecosystem is not very strong. So I would say, at least in the work that Sant Kaizen has been doing and pushing for these rights, and the work that Cassandre has been doing and making them more visible to the world, and the work that we've been doing in She Builds to create those linkages and let those voices be heard and these people be seen, is to build a stronger connection within that ecosystem so that the power supply can run through and access the nodes and activate them. That was a little bit long, but coffee to that.
Beautiful. I love it. And I have to say, Shaina, Naomi, Kassan, what you all are saying here, it doesn't remain within the context of just Haiti. I'd offer that you can see that in other spaces, whether it be at times diplomacy. Yes, things are changing, but when you look at who's at the very top, who are the people who are speaking, who are the people who are being seen, who are they, right? Like taking note of that. I'd say the same in specialty coffee from what I've seen. Phyllis Johnson. Hey, Phyllis, shout out to Phyllis, who is, I would say, very much motherboard within the world of specialty coffee. And is constantly looking for ways to increase the amplification of voices. When you're talking about marginalized groups, when you're talking about women, people who aren't often seen, who is it at the forefront who's saying we need to make this happen? Well, it's a woman who's leading the charge. And obviously there are men who, and I always talk about my husband, and I honor him because he has always pushed for the amplification of the voices of women. So what I'm hearing here is something that I think goes even beyond Haiti. We can see it in every society. So thank you, ladies. Wow, just, I'm blown away. So Cassandre, I'm going to pose a question to you within the context of where it is that you have a great deal of influence. So what is the significance of the word that you provided, unrelenting is the word that you provided, in the context of access to justice on the ground?
Right. So the significance of this when it comes to access to justice is that this is actually happening, right? Women are putting pressure on issues of access to justice in a country where the only response to any offense, any crime is l'enquête se poursuit, and then nothing, right? Nothing really happens, and impunity reigns supreme. So they are not only operating in a space of absence of justice, they are actually operating in a space where justice itself is contested, right? Like justice, the notion of justice itself is contested, right? And corruption and impunity are normalized, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times somebody tells me they have an issue in Haiti and somebody else tells them, oubliez ça, forget about it. It's not going to be resolved, right? And that is a reality. That is a reality, that there are very few opportunities for remedies and redress in Haiti. But even in the face of that, women are unrelenting. They have kept pushing, they have kept asking us to go beyond what is normal, what is comfortable for us, right? Which is also coincidentally very bad for a society, and asking us to go beyond that. And you know, I'm really invigorated by the role that women are playing today, especially younger women, in the space of gender equality, access to justice, but even innovation, right? Because after the earthquake, most of the feminist leadership in Haiti was wiped out. You know, the leaders of the major feminist groups were wiped out, literally. And now, you know, many years later, we're seeing a crop of new organization led by amazing young women like Centre Kaizen with Naomi, but also there are other ones like Dantor, Marie-Jeanne, Kaizoun, Kaifam, Fondation Toya, which has a great campaign out now called Pas fait comme si Pawe, about violences done to women and girls, and Femme Décidée. And these are all new platforms. They are not reinventing what was done by the older feminist groups. So what they're doing is that they're thinking about new ways to connect with them and work with them using whatever medium that they are experts in. So whether it's the arts, whether it's social media, etc. So they're thinking about new ways of innovating in this space. And I think it's just, you know, really amazing. And I cannot wait to see what they do, because, you know, they haven't displaced older organizations like SOFA. They've actually been like, we have something else to offer. So let's partner and let's work together, because there is space for everybody here, right? There is space for all of us to be involved. This is not a zero-sum game, and there's so much work to do. So I am, you know, I am invigorated by the work. I am invigorated, and yes, they have been unrelenting, and just what they've been doing in this space that they've been provided is evidence of that.
My goodness, ladies. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm invigorated just from hearing your voices. My God. I will note, So Cassandre, you said pas faire comme si ou pas ouais. So just for our English speakers, don't act as though you don't see. That's what that translates to. And so I just kind of want to soak all of this in. I mean, each one of you brought in such a different perspective, and I am hoping that this is definitely not going to be the last time that people in the world of coffee, because while this is for everyone, for David and I, it was really important that those who are in the coffee industry get to hear your voices and get to hear this, not just, because it's not always about the main thing, is there are so many other things that affect the main thing. So your voices are just going to, I believe, invigorate many others. So thank you for that. I'm going to slightly shift just a bit where I'm going to pose a question first to Naomi. So if I may, Naomi, as a gender specialist, what kind of indicators have you used in the past to better understand the state of gender equality in Haiti? That's the first part of the question, and then I'll bring the other part in.
Okay. For me, the best indicators are those who are related to women empowerment. And empowerment is to give power, to give choice. And this power can be measured through three dimensions. Agency, this means that women have individual and collective capacity, knowledge and skills, attitude, critical reflection, asset, action, and access to services. The second dimension is relation. When the expectation and cooperative or negotiation dynamics are embedded within relationship between people in the home, market, community, group, or organization. And the third is structures, where the informal institution rules govern collective, individual, and institutional practices such as environmental, social norm, recognition, and status. I think those indicators, if they are based on to give women choices, to give women opportunity to fulfill their potential, they are best. You cannot measure only the representative aspect of we have women here in the room, but you have to measure the transformational processes, the power that the power that they have access to, but also the power that they use to do changes.
Wow, that hit straight home. That was so good. Naomi, thank you very much for especially kind of fleshing out the nuance in that. I think particularly as we are moving towards a space where people are looking to have greater representation, that sometimes it can be cheapened. And that's not to say that, that we don't want women at the table. I've always been a fan of saying, we're just gonna build a whole new table. Like, I'm gonna build a whole new table because sick of it. But I think the point that you made there about transformational power, about actually having agency, not just simply being a face at the table, not just being a face in front of the camera, but having the ability to say, we're gonna go here if it is the right place to go to, and then you'll be able to go there with those who are with you, right? And I think that just hearing you say that, Naomi, truly it leads me to want to have a conversation about true agency, and also leads me to think about how sometimes representation is a form of death. And I don't mean death physically, but from my own experience in being in certain institutions that were just genuinely not really made for me, that even when I did have a seat at the table, the ability, when correct, right, to actually speak and be heard was sometimes suppressed, and it was not always really well received. And so what you're saying here, I think, is key for us to walk with. Is it just a matter of representation, or is there going to be transformational power at the table? Because if there's not this sense of transformational power at the table, is that a table that we want to sit at? You know? So wow, thank you for that. That was excellent. And if I could actually ask one more question regarding this specific idea here. Do you believe that the indicators that you've just mentioned, do you believe that they've actually been helpful in helping us measure exactly where the state of gender equality is in Haiti, especially, and I believe Kassan kind of noted this a little bit earlier, with the earthquake that occurred, so 2010, where we are now, do you feel like if we were to start pulling back the curtain on some of these indicators that we would be able to say there's been forward movement, or do you feel that that's not the case? Could you give us your insight in that, please?
I think that the gender equality sector, as all the sector, has evolved. Well, for the measurement of gender equality, we were from women in development to gender in development, and now we are in the transformational aspect. And this evolution is not, I can say, not really, really well implemented in Haiti, but we can educate and we can help pass from the women in development to these transformational approaches. What is really, really interesting in the transformational approach is like a holistic approach, like an ecosystem. It's not like only we have to work on women, but we have to work on men, on masculinity's aspect. We have to work with structure, with education, how you raise or you educate girl and boy, and you have to work with employer. You have to work with leaders, organization. So this is a holistic and a collective aspect, and it's really interesting because it makes gender equality transversal. It's not like when we talk about gender equality, you have to name women. Let me give you an example. You want to, an example of a project like that. You want to have health material in schools, but if you didn't consider, how can I say, serviette hygienique, hygienic pad, like health materials, you are outside of something.
Sorry,
because
pardon, Naomi, were you saying like tampons or period pads?
Yes.
Which we're not going to be afraid to say. We can say period pads on this webinar. Okay, go ahead, Naomi.
Okay, so if you didn't consider that like health material for school, you go outside of something important, because a lot of girls lack school because of that, because they don't have money to buy that. So, you know, like this transformational aspect help think outside of the box and help innovate and help make gender equality and women rights, girls' rights in the right place, and to think about it. And it's why I think that when you think about individual aspect, agency, and structure, those indicators really touch aspect and really, really igniting, raise innovation.
Sorry, I'm muted. Sorry, I'm so like enthralled by your words that I keep forgetting to unmute myself. But yes, absolutely spot on. Thank you so much for that, Naomi. And thank you. I'm going to make a point of this, not to beleaguer the point, but it's really important that we not be afraid to speak about things that affect women. Part of the reason why women have suffered for so long is because we haven't been able to just say it. It shouldn't be taboo to talk about period pads. Like that's something that women need to know about. It shouldn't be taboo to say it. And so thank you for making a note of, hey, these types of things matter in the conversation. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to kind of jump around with our questions. Cassandre, so you spent over a decade. I want to make sure I'm getting this right, because accuracy, right? You spent over a decade working at the intersection of human rights, racial justice, development, and philanthropy. Could you please provide us with insight on what the state of women's access to justice in Haiti today is? If access to justice broadly includes the existence of substantial rights to fair and effective processes, accountability, transparency, and lack of corruption in judicial institutions.
Thanks, Naomi. Sorry, thanks again. So let's actually define access to justice a little bit, because I think it's such a kind of a larger, a loaded term, right? So it is, as you say, larger than access to lawyers and courts, which is what people tend to think about when you think about access to justice. But it also means like smaller things like access to legal aid, right? Low or free representation. It means paralegal access. In a lot of countries, and this is a potential for Haiti too, paralegals are kind of the bridge between communities and the legal system, because we're never going to have enough lawyers who service an entire population. So what we do as legal professionals is that we try to build knowledge of the law in other people who are best placed in a community to help them navigate legal issues. So that's access to justice, right? It's also making sure community members understand their rights, right? Understand that as humans, they have rights. And if those rights are violated, there is a process to remedy it, right? There's a process to redress it. And so, I want to talk about two things that Naomi mentioned, which were agency and transversality, right? So access to justice is about giving everybody agency to the law. It's about taking the law and not making it this thing that's over there for other people very high up, but it's bringing it down to the level of understanding of everyone in the community, right? So that's access to justice, and it's transversal. So it's supposed to exist across every sector, across every industry. So we're not only talking about access to justice when it comes to gender violence, right? It's literally, everything. Like, can I get a bank loan as a woman, or as a woman of lower socioeconomic means? Does that mean that I'm suddenly locked out of having access to certain things? So it's across a number of, it's across all areas. And, if we're being honest, that is a huge challenge in Haiti. That's a huge challenge, because let's think, if a woman has an issue, any issue in Haiti, where does she go to seek justice with the big J, in the courts, or justice with the little j, sort of in the everyday interactions, right? And how she is treated if she's reporting something, is she going to be called certain names? I remember when I think her name is Nice Simon. She was an actress who then became a mayor in Tabal, and she was violated by her partner, and the media ran with it, and it was all about re-victimizing the victim. So they used all kinds of words. The video where she showed how she was bruised up was turned into some kind of like meme, you know. So what are we actually, what are the messages we're sending to women by doing that, right? What are the messages we're sending to women, and what are we teaching our sons, by the way, right? So those are really important things, and that is an aspect of access to justice, because when you want to think about access to justice, you have to start at the very beginning, right? It's about education. It's about education, and the earlier you can have not any kind of education, but a human rights centered education, education that looks at everybody as being dignified and being a rights holder. That is the kind of education that foments the kind of society where you have access to justice, right? In practical terms, Haiti does not have a tradition of legal aid or pro bono legal practice, right? That's just not something that we do in our society, and it is something that we should really invest in, right? Just as we're thinking about you know, corporate social responsibility for businesses in Haiti, we need to be thinking about, okay, so now you're in this position of power, you're a lawyer, you're a judge, or whatever. How do you give back to your society? How do you make sure that other people have access to justice? So really, it's about shifting the mindset of people, right? Shifting the mindset to show them that access to justice, everybody's deserving of that, right? Everybody's deserving of that, from the Timashun to the Madasara to the entrepreneur. Everybody is deserving of justice because everybody is a rights holder. So it's really about, you know, drilling that part. And you know what, I have to say, I've worked in countries where I've seen a shift in that mindset in a period of 5 to 10 years. So it's not impossible. You know, people might be like, oh, well, you know, how are we going to do pro bono? Lawyers can't even get like people to pay for their actual cases. You know, it's not just about this idea of like doing something for free. It's about your responsibility. It's about your vocation. And what's interesting about access to justice is that actually it decenters the lawyer, right? We don't want to be relying on lawyers. That's why we want to make sure that everybody in society understands the law so that they can interact with the law. So that's what's beautiful about access to justice. We don't need to rely on like, you know, the one lawyer in the town, because if the one lawyer in the town goes and teaches people, here's what's happening, here are your rights, here's what to look for, and here's how you can engage with it, here's how you can engage in your, you know, local court, then that's where we want to get to, right? Because we want everybody to have agency, we want everybody to hold a little bit of that power. So that's what's really special about access to justice, because it's not about the lawyer, it's not about the fancy books, the fancy words, it's literally about distilling this at a much more community level so that everybody holds a piece of the pie.
So good. Wow. You ladies are just bring fire this morning. It's so wonderful. Passan, if I may just kind of bring a bit of a follow-up into what you said. And there, I'm gonna have to, honestly, I'm gonna re-watch this because I wanna take more of these nuggets. It's a lot of just powerful moments. Did we lose you, Kassan? No, okay, you're there, perfect. You know, I think in terms of sound bites, and there are so many sound bites from all of you coming out, like my comms hat is like, oh my gosh, this is so good. So, but not just sound bites, but truly, really remarkably, I think a path forward. And that's what I hear. When I hear each of you speaking, I hear a looking and acknowledging the history and then taking the power of that history to forge a path forward. And that's what our world needs, not just Haiti, but literally our global community needs your voices. And so with that, Passan, if I may, what you mentioned that you've seen through your work over the past decade, you've been working on this. And so what kind of changes need to take place on the ground to ensure greater access to justice for women and girls? What, even if you could give us two, if you're like, if we could get these two, what would they be? Thank you.
Right. So I started to mention one of them, but I mean, I think what we need to do is we need to just change the terms of engagement. Clearly, they haven't been working for us. So we need to change the terms of engagement. And one of those ways is to really think about internalized misogyny in our societies, right? I think, in Haiti, the word for woman could be like a great word or it could be an insult, right? Like, how do we use our words? How do we think, how do we give power to certain narratives? Like, that is really important. And part of that can be addressed through education, through this like human rights centered education framework. What is each of us doing, when we have children? What are we starting to teach them? Because there's evidence that shows children at a very young age start to understand dynamics of exclusion and racism and all of these things, right? As early as 2 or 3 years old. So we need to be very proactive in making sure that we're making sure that these narratives are not replicating themselves. So, and that's why I love the framework of education, because everybody is deserving of receiving education, and we could improve the way that everybody is being educated. As a person who teaches in a university, I'm constantly thinking about who's teaching, what are we teaching, and how are we teaching it? Who are we reading? Those things are so important. And I think, and that's part of re-engaging, changing the terms of engagement, because that is also very resisted at a certain level. I cannot tell you how many times I've had like a white professor be like, "Oh, you talk too much about human rights." I teach human rights. Like, of course I talk about human rights. I read too many Black authors. I'm too radical or whatever, right? But that's okay, because I understand that I need to change the terms of engagement if I want to see any of the changes that I want to see long term. So one of the things that we do in Access to Justice is that we tend to really target the youth. And we do that for a few reasons, right? A lot of the countries I've worked in are countries that have a youth bulge. I've worked in Cote d'Ivoire, in the Dominican Republic, and Haiti is a country that has a large young population, right? So the idea of working with youth means that you can actually then kind of shift that information transversally, right? So they can teach an older generation, but they can also teach younger generations about what they're learning in this access to justice framework. And you can also transform things that could be negative into positive. So I think a lot about countries where a lot of young people don't have access to work, they don't have access to education. Being able to train them as paralegals, which I've done in the Dominican Republic, has really given them a sense of confidence, a sense of empowerment, where maybe that energy could have been used to something detrimental, but now it is being used to help their community. So it's this beautiful renewal where you're actually taking people who, they have the desire, but they may not have the outlet. And now you're bringing something in, right? You're bringing something that they can directly see how they can help their communities. And it's a really beautiful thing when you see that transformation. And then how they're able to go and resolve something with like the civil registry. Hey, this person applied for their national ID and they can't get it, but I know that, according to the law, these are the forms they were supposed to fill out. Here are the forms, we have the copies of them. Can you make this happen, right? Literally being that bridge. And that does so much for the confidence of a person. That does so much for the empowerment aspect, on the individual level, but also on the community level. So, so these are some of the ways that you can kind of start to change that conversation. And also it decentralizes the lawyer, right? So that now people don't have to feel like they are at the mercy of, this one person, or the few people who have that power, because that power has been decentralized and instilled in other people in their community. So it's really a each one teach one kind of model. What I learn, I teach you, and then you hopefully teach somebody else, and by that we're literally we're sharing the power, right? So so that's really the kinds of changes that we try to do. And I mean, there's a very technical way of doing it, but I think the greatest impact is just, for me, how it changes the mindset. And it, you know, when we talk about people who are empowered, it's just, I mean, I think it can avoid some serious societal problems when we have more people empowered, and therefore not speaking out in ways that are just really harmful to society, that really break down the social contract. I'll stop there.
Amore, madame. Du feu, donc, Kyla. That was so good. Kassan, so many levels to what you were just saying. And I, as somebody who has never once been taught by a person of color, earned my undergraduate degree, graduate degree, I've never once had a teacher or professor of color. I want to say thank you to you. I want to say thank you for standing in front of a classroom, for being on now because of the pandemic, you know, being on a screen and being willing to push the boundaries, being willing to change the terms of engagement, because unless we do that, no one else will do it for us. And so I want to say thank you to you. For every colleague who's come to you and told you X, Z, Y, forget them, because you are literally changing our future. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. And now, Shaina Walsu, coming to you. In the space of in the space of innovation, right? Markets, economy, apparently, or supposedly, I should say rather, supposedly, money is what makes things move, right? And if that's the case, the question that I have here for you is, as stated, Shaina, based on your experience working in Haiti as an ecosystem architect and founder of the She Builds Global Initiative, what is the state of women's access to innovation and markets, money, in Haiti today? Note that access in this context broadly includes access to technology, investors, and public institutions for developing and scaling innovative women-led businesses. Shaina, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I want to just add a caveat to what you just said. The value that we give money is what makes things move, not money itself. Money itself is a piece of paper, but the value that we give it is what makes things move. You are hilarious, by the way. I just love being on webinars with you because you're just such an energetic person and you really bring life to conversation. So thank you for everything you're doing. So talking about the ecosystem, specifically in the context of Haiti, just for those who are not completely clear on what an ecosystem is or what an innovation ecosystem consists of, it has different stakeholders like the media, government, venture capitalists, academia, and community organizations who are all sort of pooling together resources to support and create an enabling environment for entrepreneurs, right? So imagine a circle and everyone's holding hands in the circle. All of these stakeholders have to hold hands and create an environment that lifts these entrepreneurs and allows them to succeed. Now, when you look at an environment like Haiti, where the media seldom talks about the success stories of entrepreneurs, that's a weak link in the ecosystem. When you look at venture capital, a community that does not exist in Haiti, that's another weak link in the ecosystem. There are no venture capitalists in Haiti. When you look at the government and you look at the types of regulations that are in place to support certain types of innovative businesses, to support local production versus importation, it's another weak link in the ecosystem. So you have an ecosystem where a lot of the actors that are there and supposed to be holding hands and creating this enabling environment are very weak. And in a very distorted way, actually creating the opposite type of environment. It's a very aggressive environment towards entrepreneurs, right? So another entity in this ecosystem is the community organizations. So the community organizations, whether they're nonprofit or multinational, are the ones who are actually holding the ecosystem together, right? Today, if you ask an entrepreneur, how do they get access to funding? They're not gonna say a bank. The banks are a threat. Interest rates are too high. No entrepreneur is going to a bank to get a loan. Unlike in the United States, where you can go open an account, get a loan, you have assets that the loan is matched up to, and if you don't pay back your loan, the bank takes your asset. That does not exist in Haiti. No entrepreneur is gonna go to the bank. The second way that you could get funding is through microcredit. Today, at least for women, according to research, 74% of women access funding through microcredit, which means it is the largest financial service providing capital to businesses. Microcredit. Microcredit, that means you're getting maybe $200 of a loan for a business. Imagine what that does to innovation, where you need to buy equipment, where you need to pay for a factory and real estate, where you need to pay for technology and talent. What is $200 going to do for that kind of business? So what happens is, because the funding is so little, most businesses resort to retail and hospitality, things that don't require a lot of capital. So you don't have a whole pool of entrepreneurs who are trying to create big moonshot types of businesses, because they don't have access to these resources. And they're not going to put their own lives on the line and forego providing for their family just to pursue a dream. That's unrealistic, right? And just a little statistic there, in terms of microfinancing, the average loan is about $220 for microfinance. Imagine, like, what can you really pay for that with that for a business, right? So it's a very crippling ecosystem, and you have a lot of women who are wanting to build businesses, who are wanting to be innovative, and simply do not have the access and ability to be able to do that. I wrote another statistic down while Kassan was talking about, education, where a lot of the disparities in the ecosystem come from the fact that women are also not able to access education as much as men are able to. And that's because of the role that they play in our society, in our very patriarchal society, right? And we have this saying in Haiti where we call femme potomita. I have a love-hate relationship with that term, because it means that they are literally the spine, as I had described in the beginning, right? They are the backbone of the household, but they don't have the rightful place in terms of power when it comes to making decisions and having access to certain opportunities. So you are labeling women as potomita, but without the same level of power. So it's extremely imbalanced, right? So I want to contest potomita and what we really mean by that. The second part of that is that what they really mean by potomita is the woman who is taking care of the household, right? Taking care of the household chores, making sure the house is clean, making sure everyone is fed, making sure kids go to school. But the woman herself is not going to school. The woman herself has a small little business that's bringing in a little extra income for the household. So she's not going out there being an executive and leading a world-class, multinational, global market accessed business. She's not. She's at home taking care of the household. That's the potomitan that we're describing, and we need to rethink that, right? In many ways. So the ecosystem itself is already broken, as I've shared. Media, very weak, not a lot of stories coming out, right? How many stories have you heard of Haitian women recently or in the past 100 years who are succeeding in their business? I mean, the most recent that I've heard was Delphine Gaudel, who is now CEO of Bob & Cool. And I'm pretty sure she had to push very hard to get that news. And it was also, I mean, Babonko is a national brand. So that's not going to make the news. But imagine all the small businesses. How would you have heard of a Saint-Kaizen? How would you have heard of a Valplast, one of the women in our Moonshot Academy, or Atelier Kala, or Atelier Collab, or Eco Renew Solutions, or Cosmos Solutions, all of these women who are building businesses and are trying, but the media is not talking about them because it's not a breakthrough story talking about politics and corruption. It's talking about progress and no one wants to hear that. So our media is broken. Venture capital does not exist. Are we frozen? Okay, we're back.
You're back on now. You're back on now. Continue.
Entrepreneurs, especially women, do not go to the bank for funding. I mean, for women, you have to have a man co-sign for you. So forget if you're a woman-owned business, you better have a man next to you to co-sign if you really want to take the risk and go to the bank. But it does not exist. You have two options: microfinance or apply for a grant or a competition. And how many competitions do we see exist out there where people can apply and pitch at a pitch competition? It doesn't exist. So it's limiting and it's crippling. I can describe a lot of other facets of the ecosystem and how it's broken, because there are many. And I know that there are a lot of organizations who are looking to bridge some of these gaps, including our own. But it's, it requires a critical mass of people to take on and tackle different aspects of that ecosystem. Someone needs to tackle media and start having different conversations, a little bit like how you're doing. We've been doing it too, hosting digital town halls, just speaking about things differently. Someone needs to tackle venture capital. It's a risky environment. We can't think about venture capital the way that we've been thinking about it, like Silicon Valley does it. We cannot be a Silicon Valley. It's a high risk environment in Haiti. How do we rethink venture capital? So those are the things that, make up the existing ecosystem, some of the gaps that exist. And it's 10 times harder for women because of the role that they play and the gender imbalance in our society. They have even less access to these things.
Boy, all of you guys, Shy, I'm just, yeah, absolutely. I am with you 110%. And I think that because we have some folks on who are a part of the international community, the question, the follow-up to kind of like the bombshell that you just dropped. And from like beginning to end, it's the value that we give to money. What? Yes, absolutely. You're right. Absolutely. Let's start shifting the conversation, and just going back to, we need to change the way that we engage. We literally need to change the terms of engagement. Thank you, Kasan, for that. And your point to Potomita, I have to actually give Shaina honor in this space, because David and I, when we wanted to create a blend specifically in honor of the initiative that Shaina started that is now global, we were actually going to have Potomita be part of the narrative that we were telling. And Shaina, she kind of like kindly pulled us aside and was like, okay, well guys, I know that this is generally what is said, but like, what do you think about like femme voyant? And I was like, tell me more. And I think this is, and I am telling this story because I think people who own businesses in the United States, who are telling stories about other nations, need to have voices like Shaina at the table. They need to have access to people like Kasan. They need to have access to people like Naomi, so that when, we come up with our great ideas speaking about these societies or talking about these cultures, that we don't get so hung up in what we think is the right thing without really actually listening to the people who actually may really, really know what could change the game, what could change the term of engagement, if you will. And so now our She Builds bag that are in honor of the She Builds Global Initiative, they say femme voyant, right? If you read it, it's not Potomita. And I think, quite frankly, maybe if we did this like 3 years ago, that's probably what we would have written if I didn't have somebody like David and I didn't have somebody like Shaina speaking to us and giving us these insights. And so I just want to make a pitch right now to those in the coffee world, to those outside of the coffee world. I mean, whether you're in diplomacy, whatever it is, if you have a platform of any kind, please engage the people that you're talking about in the products it is that you're presenting to the world, because it does have a long-term impact. It does have real life effect. So just gonna go ahead out there and say, thank you, Shai, for noting that and for unpacking that nuance for our audience. So as a follow-up question, I know that our time is coming near. I wanna make sure that I'm honoring our audience and honoring, of course, our incredible panelists here with their time. I know you're all very busy people, productive rather. I don't want to put busy out there, but very productive people. So I just wanted to ask Shaina, what role can the international community and the Haitian diaspora play, if any, in moving the ball forward on access to innovation in Haiti? I'm going to caveat this by saying, you said that we can't be like Silicon Valley. Excellent, incredible. So now from your perspective, Shaina, what can we be like? What can the international community, whether it be in coffee or wherever, what can they do to help increase the space in terms of innovation, access to markets in Haiti? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. But I'll start by saying that we don't want to be like Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is broken. I'm sorry, I work in Silicon Valley, and I can say that the gender disparities there are just as stark. It's only that we have more infrastructure here that we're able to move things along, but we don't want to be like Silicon Valley. We want to be better than Silicon Valley. We want to be Silicon Mountain, right? Like, we don't want to replicate, for lack of better words, our colonizers. Like, it's not the model for success. And it has only been successful. If you look at the face of Silicon Valley, it's Mark Zuckerberg, right? It's a bunch of white men, Jeff Bezos. It's you don't see a lot of women. They're very few and far between. So the fight goes on here as well. It's not limited to Haiti, but the context of Haiti is very different because we're dealing with a more high context environment, right? With no infrastructure. So we need to leapfrog innovation. We don't have telephone poles that are holding up our communication grid. So we need to find other ways to build a communication system that does not involve spending 10 years of building a grid, right? Which is the benefit that Silicon Valley has, right? We need to leapfrog. So I'm gonna just side note that on the Silicon Valley piece and move into the engagement of the international community. And I only say this because Silicon Valley is actually a very exciting place to be. There's a lot of innovation happening here and a lot of people pushing for inclusion. But I know that in nascent ecosystem, I mean, I spent 2 years in Nigeria, 3 years in Cameroon. I've seen it happen where we romanticize the Silicon Valleys of the world and we want to be like them because that's where success is coming from. And we kind of diminish our own value because we don't see too many success stories around us. So I see it happening in Haiti too, where we're just like putting Silicon Valley on a pedestal and trying to create this Haitian Silicon Valley bubble, but Silicon Valley is a bubble. We need to pop the damn bubble. Like, if we're looking for inclusion, we don't want to create another bubble. Side note. So now, how can the international community be engaged? I'll start with the diaspora, because the diaspora, I believe, is a powerful force. They are an extension of Haitians outside of Haiti, right? Today, we have an issue where it's Haitien au pays, Haitien l'autre bord de l'eau, and we're constantly in friction because of multiple layers of reasons. That needs to stop. We need to have more people speaking about unity between local and global, right? Because we're all Haitians. We're tied by a common history. We're tied by a common culture, right? We have a shared experience through our generational traumas. So we cannot be so disconnected to one another and not want the diaspora to be involved, or the diaspora to look down at what Haitians are doing and thinking themselves to be superior. We cannot have that. So that's the first issue that we need to resolve before saying, hey, how can we get the international community involved. We have to address that piece. It's very real. And as someone who is a Haitian diaspora living in the US, wanting to be involved in Haiti for progress, I have seen the friction with the locals. I have seen it happen. So, and we're trying to disrupt that, right? To show that it is possible for the diaspora to play an integral role in the development of the country without disrupting the vision that Haitians locally have for Haiti, or diminishing that vision, but creating a better vision together of what we both can see as a future for a prosperous nation, right? So the role that the diaspora plays, honestly, in looking at the ecosystem that I described, media, government, venture capital, community organization, academia, the diaspora has the benefit of global exposure, right? Many have traveled for educational reasons, for employment reasons. So there is that global exposure of having stepped outside of the box and gone to another country and see how that country runs. So you have a different point of reference. And the locals who have never left the country may or may not have that point of reference. So the first thing that I would say is the diaspora can bring in a different point of reference to see how might we do something differently from the way we've been doing it consistently for the past 200 years. So a new perspective, a fresh perspective, not diminishing anybody's local perspective, but just bringing an additional point of view that can amplify how we can shift the system that exists. Perspective. A lot of the diaspora who have made it in the global economy are successful and have access to networks and capital, can also invest that capital into the local economy through businesses. This one is a difficult one because it's a risky environment and everyone wants a return on their investment. So that one has to really be innovated upon in order for it to work. Nobody's just gonna throw their money into a black hole and not expect, anything out of it. So it is a lever that we could use, but right now it just is not structured in a way that would allow the diaspora to actually pool and fund businesses in Haiti. But there's a lot of capital out there. We just have to find the right system to make it work, because remittances, it's going straight to family members, right? It's not going into funding businesses. So the third thing that I would say, because there are many, but I won't give a whole lot of examples, just the third thing that I would say is education. A lot of diaspora have had the opportunity to study abroad and have exposure to different institutions where they learn different structures, different frameworks, and they can bring some of that knowledge as well into the institutions that we have in our education structure in Haiti, right? We have a very old and unmodernized educational system in Haiti, where we continue to do the same things using the same physical textbooks. I was a little bit afraid when the pandemic happened and everyone was being asked to work from home. But in Haiti, you don't have a strong ITC, information communication sector, where people can just sit and work from home from a computer. Most people don't have a computer, right? It's not set up for that. So we need to rethink and look at how we can leverage some of that knowledge from how things are being disrupted, which we don't need, if we knew that we didn't need a computer, but you needed a phone to access education, then perhaps we would have looked at education very differently for the past 5 years. A lot of companies, in Southeast Asia are now creating chat-based education using WhatsApp. That's it. There are innovations like that happening, but we have to be able to bring that kind of knowledge into the environment and say, hey, we can do things differently. Now, I'll touch one last piece, which is the general international community, not necessarily Haitian. We've seen a lot of international NGOs come into the country. Many of them are not familiar with the environment. Many of them are religious-based missionary groups. I would say build a partnership with a Haitian-led entity and provide your insights, capital, networks, resources to amplify what that Haitian-led entity is trying to do. At the end of the day, it has to be Haitian designed solutions, right? It's solutions designed for the Haitian people. So if you have a Chinese person coming in wanting to drop their nonprofit organization in the middle of Port-au-Prince with very limited knowledge on how Haiti operates or the Haitian history or culture, they just want to do some sort of activity, some benevolent activity, it can actually prove to be more destructive than constructive, right? We've seen that happen a lot with donations of rice that has killed the farming sector in Haiti just by donating free rice, where now nobody wants to pay for expensive rice. So you have farmers who are leaving farms to go live in the city, creating overpopulation in cities and increasing the insecurity. Do you see the trickle-down effect? Because of free rice, right? But if that organization had partnered with a local farmer coalition to support those farmers in producing local rice, rather than giving them free rice from Arkansas, then you would have a more productive local economy led by Haitians in partnership with the international community.
Wow, ladies, thank you all. Shaina, thank you for that. I heard partnership said over and over again, and that I think is just, it's so key. Being partners, walking literally hand in hand, not coming in and trying to do our own thing, right? Whether it be the diaspora or just someone who, as you noted, is just in the international community. We need to go into spaces, not just Haiti, wherever it is that we're going, and enter as genuine partners. And so on that note, I want to thank all three of you. This has been such an enlightening conversation. I am so hopeful. I am so filled with hope hearing your voices. And I expect that this will not be the last time, at least in the coffee space, that we hear your voices, because again, these things are all interconnected. They're not operating in silos. And so people need to hear voices like yours, all three of you. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. We've gone over our timing mark a bit, and just in of course honoring the audience's time and your time as well. I want to ask if you have any quick final words, just like closing before we close. And if you could do that, I would so appreciate it. If you have any final words, ladies, whoever would like to go first. Also, I will say that I see some questions that were posed. We won't have time to address them today. But as I said before, this is not the last time that you will see Shaina Silva, Kassan Teano, and Naomi Millien in this space for the coffee folks. So let me go ahead and mute myself. Shaina, if you want to start first and then pass it around, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Sure. I want to just say thank you again, Gaina and Kassan and Naomi. Just a pleasure being on this panel with you ladies and hearing your perspective as well. I think was very powerful, very much appreciated. This is Women's History Month, International Women's History Month, but we know that the history that we are celebrating and acknowledging is the fight for our rights, right? And the fight for us to be seen as equal in this world. So I think, at least from my perspective, when it comes to innovation and the economy, that fight requires a partnership. So women should not be fighting this fight alone. Men should be part of that, right? So partnership is not just international organizations and entities, diaspora versus local. It should also be men with women. We need our partners, we need our friends, we need our educators, we need our government representative to stand with the cause for women, and not just, to say it, but to act it and to put it into play in our society.
For me, I think we need to innovate in our way of thinking. We need to have another perspective. And I think putting women in that position of power can give that innovation is the thinking. And as we say, talking about women interests, women needs, and women future can lead to really, really innovate. And I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Gaina. Thank you, China. Hope to see you next time in Haiti. And thank you, Casson. Whenever you come to Haiti, don't hesitate to call me, and we can have some coffee and or some water, whatever.
So yes, thank you so much for this platform. This has been an amazing conversation. So yesterday there was a hearing before the House Foreign Affairs Committee in the US, and 3 Haitian women testified. It was an all-women panel, right? Emmanuela Douillon of Policité, Gerline Joseph of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, and Rosie Auguste du Sénat of LNDDH. And I'm saying their names because it goes back to what I said at the beginning of how we need to name them, right? We need to historicize women, right? They are our past, they are our present, they are our future. There are a million reasons for them to retreat and accept silence as the default, right? Like literally, I'm always worried about their safety, right? Because that's real. But they are laser focused on what's at stake, the future of our country, right? So they march, they speak, they forge ahead. That is the role women are playing in society today in Haiti. You know, that is the role of women. They are center stage, their voices are important, and we need to make sure that their voices are amplified. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much again. And I can't wait to come to Haiti, Naomi. We're gonna have some Davila Kafe.
Wow, ladies, from the bottom of my heart, and I know that speaking on behalf of David here, I just want to say thank you so very much. This is just the beginning. All 3 of you are just incredible pioneers, and I am watching closely. I am cheering loudly, amplifying the work that you're doing, because when one wins, we all win. And as you said earlier, Kassan, this is not a zero-sum game. There is room for all of us. And when we get serious about amplifying our voices, we're going to see change. When we get serious about showing the work that's been done and saying their name, historicizing these women, the ones that I'm even looking at right now, that's what's going to bring change. So thank you to our audience who joined us today. Thank you, incredible panelists. And I look forward to chatting with y'all again in the future. Cool, bisous. Sending lots of kisses and hugs to y'all. All right, everybody, have an incredible weekend, and let's go. Let's make a change. Bye, guys.